Hi guys, this is Sarah Hudson from Breaking Into Software. So I have a YouTube channel and a podcast, and I try to post answers to questions that people have in CS and just informational content because I remember when I first started out in software and it was super intimidating, and basically I'm just trying to share the knowledge I wish I had when I had just started out in software. So this is some of my responses to an AMA I posted on Girls Gone Wired on Reddit. I'm going to keep doing that, just seeing if people have questions and then trying to just post a few responses a week. Because a lot of people helped me when I was starting out, so I want to help a lot of people as well. Anyway, this is my response to the first several questions I received, and I'll keep posting responses to the following questions in the next few days as I have time. So this is the question I posted. I started off with just talking about some of my experience so people would understand that I think I have some knowledge to bring to the table. So I've done actually 6 total internships in my undergrad, 2 while I was working, doing school at a company called MSCI. And then I did 2 at Microsoft and 2 at Google. If you see this video on YouTube and you want to ask me a question, feel free to go to Reddit and find this thread and post a question, or you can just comment a question on my video and I'll try to respond to it. So the first question I got, or one of the first questions I decided to respond to was, they said, so Northern Border said, I guess my question would be, how different are SWE 1 and SWE 2 roles? If I'm going to have around 5 years experience when I finish at my current company, second one after university, I'm not sure yet if I can apply for the second role, as that will have more compensation, ? Also, looking for a FANG that would sponsor H-1 visa for a Canadian wanting to live in the States. So I'm not, I am a U.S. citizen, so I don't know a ton about H-1 visas, although I did have a few friends that needed some. As far as I know, the larger the company, I think the easier it is for you to get an H-1 visa. So you're probably already steering towards large companies because I believe that costs a lot of money for the company. So larger companies can handle that cost easier. Might be wrong about that, so take what I'm saying about the visas with a grain of salt. But it sounds like they're already trying to do that because they then commented, I'm at my second full-time job now. 2.5 years first job, then 1 month into my second. So I'm not sure if I have enough experience to apply for Amazon SWE 2. So as far as do you have enough experience to apply for an Amazon SWE, which actually Amazon calls their engineering positions SDE, Software Development Engineer, I believe. For level 2, so I took a screenshot of a job posting for SDE 2 for Amazon on LinkedIn. And so their basic qualifications are that you have 2+ years of non-internship professional software development experience, which it sounds like this user does have. Programming experience with at least one modern language such as Java, C++, or C#, including object-oriented design, and 1+ years of experience contributing to the architecture, design patterns, reliability, and scaling of new and current systems. So I would just say Northern Border, if you already have about 5 years of experience, I think you are well set to apply for SDE level 2. You might even be able to go higher than that. I know the compensation is better, so that's a reason to try to apply for that. I would just make sure that you also brush up on architecture and design, because that's not normally something that's really taught a lot about in a bachelor's degree. At least it wasn't in my university. And it is something that when you go into higher levels of engineering, they tend to start asking questions about in the interview. So I would look up a course on that, or if you already know a lot about that, just brush up your skills on that, as well as coding questions. As far as how different the roles are, I think honestly, because I haven't worked in a SDE level 2 role yet, I couldn't tell you. But from what I have heard from people around me, I would say you have more responsibility. You're expected to contribute more after you finish onboarding, things like that. They're just hoping you have more industry experience, really, versus an SDE 1 would be maybe wouldn't expect like almost any real life experience yet, aside from just having maybe had a few internships and having gotten your degree. But yeah, as far as H1 visa, I would just really try to go for large companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon. I don't know, LinkedIn is honestly a great one, I think. Those are just some of the companies that come to mind. There's a lot more, so. Beth Maloney asked, how did you do 4 internships at my university? We had one unit that allowed us to do a single internship. So I'm not entirely sure what you're asking, Beth. I did the internships during the summer. This last summer, I actually did 2 internships because, and I started my first internship at Google a few weeks before the semester ended and worked the whole summer. And then I started as soon as, like, the Monday after I ended my internship at Google, I started one at Microsoft and went a few weeks into the next semester, this fall semester. So I wouldn't recommend that, actually. The reason I did that was just to save up a little more money for my last year of school, and then also just so I would have 2 offers at the same time, because when you have an offer from one internship for a full-time position, they know that you normally don't have time to interview with other companies yet and negotiate, so they can sort of use that to push you into just accepting the first offer they give you if they give you a full-time offer, and I didn't want to be in that position. So what I planned was, if I finish one internship and immediately do another one, Google is notorious for taking forever to give full-time offers out, even to interns, if you receive one. So it actually worked out sort of exactly like I had hoped. By the time I had my final offer in writing from Google, that was right when Microsoft was starting to negotiate with me for a full-time offer. So I was able to sort of use both offers to get them raised. And I just want to add a quick note. If you're doing that, don't feel bad about that, because if you're bringing a lot of value to a company, they need to be giving you a fair wage. Well, okay, that's sort of strong to say, not fair wage, but they should be ready to compensate you more if other companies are wanting you as well. And if they're trying to rush you into a decision, I would not feel bad about asking for more money. And the truth is, I think Google is an amazing company, and I think Microsoft is a great company as well. But when it comes to negotiating with interns, they can both be, especially Google, a little on the side of not wanting to give you what they might offer people who didn't just finish an internship, because they know that you're in a position where you don't have a lot of leverage to negotiate with other offers. So I think that's unfortunate, but that's also life. And I also know that I'm incredibly blessed to have received an offer at all from either of them. Anyway, so sorry, sort of rambled on that one. But Beth, basically to sum that up, I'm not really sure where you're going to school. Maybe you're in a university that only allows you to do a single internship, but I think maybe you're referring to during the semester, like in school, they have a class. A lot of universities offer like a class for credit where you do an internship. If that's what you're referring to, that makes a lot more sense. But if you're just referring to internships in general, I believe the summer is yours and you can do with it what you want. So if you want a lot of great full-time offers, and honestly, if you just want to learn a lot, I would highly recommend trying to do a software internship during the summer, because I would say I learned 80% of what I know from my internships, and about 20% of what I know from my classes in school. So they're very worthwhile, and usually they also pay pretty well, which can really help if you're supporting yourself through school like I did. The point at which asked, how did you pass the resume screening for both of them? Did you have referrals? What do you do to prepare before an interview? So really, I had referrals. What do I do to prepare before an interview? Well, a lot of practice. I actually would start practicing months before I knew applications for internships were going to open up, and I would be one of the first people ready to apply to all the software internships when they began opening. And the truth is, you should not wait to begin practicing and learning right like when you apply, because if they ask you to interview, that's not really enough time to get the practice you need in. So I would start months in advance, usually around like February or March. I practiced the whole summer, and then when internships began opening in like September, October timeframe, I would immediately begin applying. And if I was asked to interview like a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, I was in a really good position because I just had, come off months of practicing. I realize not everyone has the time to do that, but I will say that I practiced, I don't know, maybe an hour a day during this whole summer, and I was working a full-time job. So I just encourage you, if you say, I don't have time, the truth is, like, if you really want something, you need to be willing to work for it. So if you really want to work at a company like Google or Amazon, you need to make the time. So you decide in your life what's important to you. If it's hanging out with friends and that's what you want to do, that's great. If it's going out and partying, good for you. But don't be surprised if you aren't good enough then to pass the interviews. If you want to be really good, you have to put the work in. Some people sort of get through, but usually you just have to be like a good enough engineer, good enough software developer to get a job at a company like Microsoft or Google. And so I know people have had different experiences than I have had, but I just was like, I want a really good paying job after college. And I think that's worth working really hard in college, practicing CS questions, practicing whiteboarding, really studying for my courses, specifically data structures and algorithm analysis, so I could really understand those concepts well. Because if you get an internship, it's very likely if you do well in that, you'll get a full-time offer. And then while all your friends their senior year are freaking out because they don't have a job yet, you have the time to just relax and have fun because you already have a full-time offer. So I would encourage you to start early and work hard. But specifically, the resources I used were algoexpert.io. I think that's way better than LeetCode and HackerRank, just because they have a very systematic way that they approach coding questions. They also have a lot of questions, but they explain like why they have each question. Like they're sort of working on the core foundations, and interviewing questions are really they're really trying to just see, do you understand coding and do you understand it really well? Do you understand data structures really well? Do you understand time and space complexity really well? And this is just my opinion, but I think websites like LeetCode push you towards just memorizing a bunch of answers and practicing a ton of questions and not really actually trying to understand the core concepts and how they work. That being said, I know some people who just did a ton of LeetCode questions and that worked really well for them. So I'm not saying that's not an option. I just don't think that's the most efficient option if you don't have a lot of time to be practicing this stuff. AlgoExpert does cost. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, so I'm not getting anything from recommending them. That's really just the tool I've used for like 3 years now. They just had they have a data structures crash course if you're coming from a different industry, and they give you a question. You can solve it in almost any language, and then they have a conceptual video that walks out like the thought process and the logic behind solving the question, and then they'll walk you like through it visually and the code. And I think I'm a visual learner, so I think that walking through it visually really helped me understand questions that I was a little bit confused on, especially when it came to harder questions like trees and graphs. Anyway, I would encourage you to check them out. But also the first resource I ever used was Cracking the Coding Interview by Gail McDowell. I read through that when I didn't even really know what a linked list was, and it was a little bit intimidating, but it also helped me understand like the core concepts I should be focusing on. And it is really good for understanding the different logic and thought process behind the hiring and interview structures of the different larger companies. So, and in case you guys don't know this, Gail McDowell, who wrote that book, worked for several companies and was on one of Google's hiring committees. So she really knows what she's talking about. It's a great book, and AlgoExpert is a great website in my opinion. They both cost money. If you don't have a lot of money, I understand. I went through school completely supporting myself, didn't have a lot of money, but I 100% think both were worth the investment. And I sort of viewed it as an investment into my future. So I would just think of it like that. And then also, like, when you're really focusing on the core concepts of data structures and algorithm analysis, time complexity, space complexity, it's not just good for the interviewing, but that can also help you in your internship. And even after you pass an interview to get an internship, you need to do well in that internship to get a full-time job offer. So it still benefits you a lot to really understand the core concepts and not just memorize questions from LeetCode. And then ZZZ Lexus asked, "Hi, I'm trying to make the switch to a tech company, currently work in IT for non-tech and have been overwhelmed with the interview process. mainly the technical assessment portion. How do you handle the pressure of them without letting imposter syndrome overtake you? And the yellow pants responded, study, study, study. For big tech places like Apple and Amazon, there's wonderful YouTubers with great prep videos. I totally agree with what yellow pants said. There's some great YouTube channels you can go look at. I think CS Ninja, I think that's his YouTube name, has pretty good content. But really, if you just like Google or YouTube whiteboarding questions, things like that, those will help. A lot of the larger companies also have great like sort of short courses to walk you through what they're looking for or help you go over the basics of what you should be studying. But yeah, honestly, study, study, study is a great response. When I started out, imposter syndrome is very real. And when I started in CS, I felt like a complete idiot. I didn't know anything. I remember talking to someone and they were talking about like arrays and strings, and I was so confused. I had not taken a single coding class yet. It was during the summer. I just decided I was going to study CS, and I was already trying to figure out how am I going to get an internship as a software engineer, but I didn't know anything about coding yet. I think I knew a little Python. So just remember, we all start from nothing, and you will, or you could feel like an imposter for a long time. I still sometimes feel like an imposter, and I have a job offer from Google that I've accepted. So that's something you might deal with your whole life, but really the best way to get past that is to just learn what you don't know. And you don't know what you don't know until you sit down and really start practicing things, because then you'll come across questions that you have no idea like what the answer is. But if you don't ever sit down to start practicing, you might think you know a lot and realize like you don't actually know that much. But that's okay, because once you know what you need to work on and you begin working on that, I think you'll gain a lot of confidence. But also just remember that, like, especially with interviews, we all have bad days, and sometimes you can just have a really bad interviewer. Things aren't always in your control. You might not always get an offer, and that might be completely out of your control. But what you can control is how much effort you put in. At the end of the day, I think if you really put a lot of effort in and you're trying your hardest with the time you have, then at least for me, that really helped. It'd be like, whether or not I pass this next interview, if I know that I put the effort in that this deserved, and like I couldn't have put more effort in, I couldn't have spent more time on this, then I was like, I don't really care. Like, I hope I pass the interview, but if I don't, I'm not going to let that discourage me, because at the end of the day, I'm competing against myself, not other people. I want to work harder and better the next day for myself than I did the day before. Because there's always going to be people smarter than you. There's always going to be people better than you. And if you're always comparing yourself to other people, you probably will feel imposter syndrome for a long time. If you're just focused on learning every day more for yourself and trying to become a better version of yourself every day, and that sounds a little cheesy, but honestly, that does a lot for your confidence. And eventually you might see yourself passing a lot of people that you used to think were really smart. And I sort of experienced that. Like, I just put in a little effort every day over a long period of time. And the people who used to like know way more than me, now I feel like for sure we know the same amount, or I know more than them. But also, sometimes imposter syndrome is just from like you look around and you don't see a lot of people like yourself in your company or on your team or whatever. And so as far as that goes, like, just remember that if you're smart and you're working hard, you belong there. As long as you are making that company better somehow, you belong there and you belong on that team. Especially if you pass the interviews to get there. So yeah, technical assessment. I would just refer back to some of the earlier questions I answered. I used Cracking the Coding interview. You can use LeetCode. There's other tech websites where you can practice questions. I really like algoexpert.io. There's great YouTube channels. There's great other books and websites. I have some articles and some podcast episodes on www.breakingintosoftware.com, and you can also search Breaking Into Software on most podcasting channels to look at some of my past episodes. I try to provide content in there on how to like specifically prep for interviews with different companies, and I also interview some people from sort of varied backgrounds, more diverse backgrounds, just to try to encourage people who are coming from a diverse background that like, hey, there are people like you in these large companies. You might not see them a lot, but they definitely exist. And a lot of them have pretty similar backgrounds. Like when they started out, they did not think they belonged there. A lot of them failed interviews several times. I talked to one guy, at Google, who actually grew up in Compton, and I think the first several times he interviewed for Google, he failed. And eventually a few years later, he tried again and was good enough to get in. So just keep trying, keep moving forward, keep learning. Anyway, this video became a little longer than I thought it would, but I hope you guys enjoyed my answers, and I thought it'd be easier to just do a video so other people can use this information. And it helps because I have a lot to share, and typing it all out takes a ton of time. So hopefully you guys appreciate this, and hopefully it helped you guys a little. I'll answer the rest of the questions later this week as I have time. Thanks, guys.